systems push for inclusion and for understanding this population and understanding how we might be able to reimagine some of our housing offerings to ensure that it is accessible for all persons with all abilities. And the other thing I just wanted to add is that, of course, with that in mind, then partnerships and strategic partnerships are really important, and that is where having that dedicated position is going to be very helpful, because not only will they be managing the contracts that will result for these initiatives from some of the recommendations that we received, but more than that, they are going to be building bridges, educating housing leaders that are seeking, they're desperately seeking that education from us now that these numbers and these reports are coming out. Everyone is very, I think, energized to mobilize and do something to really make a shift.
So I have good news and bad news. The bad news is we're out of time. And the good news is I think that there is interest in, rather than having you just cut this off, having you come back and just finish the presentation if you're willing to do that. That would just be the ideas presentation. I would say Rocky Mountain is welcome to join again if you're interested, but we would not be having you open up your question and answer again. We would focus on the ideas presentation. We do have some availability on our August 3rd meeting if that's amenable to folks. And if it's not, we can work with you afterwards on an alternative. But is that acceptable then to my colleagues on the committee? Councilman Flynn won't be here. Is it your strong preference that it be on a date that you can be here, or would you be willing to watch it? He would like to be here. So we'll work on an alternative date then. Any other feedback from my colleagues on that plan? We'll be looking for a different date. We will pick up, you know, if you need to backtrack a minute for something you skipped, please feel free to do that. But, you know, and I want to say that it's always a balance when we have informational briefings and action items. I appreciate your patience with the constraints we had to work under today, and I apologize for you having to return again, but I appreciate your willingness to work with our staff on a time that can happen. And I think it's a credit to how important the program is that we finish the conversation. So thank you for your patience.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Committee members will be happy to return to you when we find that alternative date.
Okay, thank you. Yes, often we can run a little bit over. This is just not one of those days, so thank you very much. All right, take care. And I believe we have no other business before this body, so I will adjourn us.
Welcome to the Budget and Policy Committee of Denver City Council. This session of the Budget and Policy Committee begins now. I got to open the meeting. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Budget and Policy. I'm Council President Jamie Torres. I represent District 3, and I would like to start with introductions on my left at the far end of the dais.
Good afternoon, Robin Kniech, at large.
Good afternoon, Kevin Flynn, Southwest Denver's District 2.
Good afternoon, Paul Cashman, South Denver, District 6.
Good afternoon, Kendra Black, District 4. Candy Cedevaca, District 9.
Good afternoon, Joel Clark, District 7.
Good afternoon, Amanda Sawyer, District 5.
Chris Hines, Lucky District 10.
Thanks for a little bit of transition, everybody. Playing double duty and chairing the meeting as well as doing the presentation. I'm here today to talk about some of the proposed work that several of us on council have been working on around mobile home policy. And just want to give an update on some of the discussion that we've had, some of the possible policies that we'd be looking at, just to put it on your radar. Some of these things will be coming in more detail in the coming months, but I just want to make sure everyone's aware of some of the discussion that we're doing. So this effort's been collaborated on by myself, Councilmember Cedevaca, and Councilman Clark. So of the issues, so Denver zoning code currently prohibits owners of homes and mobile home parks from replacing their old homes with newer and potentially safer homes. Those restrictions also prevent residents from procuring financing towards the purchasing of parks when they are posted for sale. And in our zoning code, there is no zoning right now for mobile home parks. So some of the larger context, mobile homes are the largest source of unsubsidized affordable housing in the US. They are also lucrative business. Corporations are purchasing up mom and pop owned parks nationally. A designation of non-conforming is pretty common nationwide. Our zoning code treatment of mobile home parks has been described as some of the most hostile nationally. Colorado has also passed protections for residents of mobile home parks, but Denver zoning code prevents residents from taking advantage of the opportunity to purchase. So there are 5 mobile home parks in the city and county of Denver. They house about 300 families total. Many of the homes are over 50 years old and can be unsafe. These are the locations of the 5 parks, and they are in Council District 3, 9, and 7. So we brought together a number of partners in January of this year to start discussing what are some of the things that are in play right now, what are some of the changes that we'd like to see, what's really propelling along some of the need for us to make sure that we're discussing this, because this isn't the first time it's been discussed in Denver. It is certainly incredibly complicated and challenging. So we brought in community planning and development and made sure that fire, building inspection, and a number of our community partners were at the table who are both interested and concerned about the future of mobile home parks in the community. So we discussed a number of different proposed policy pathways. One, learning from Colorado 9 to 5 about a moratorium that was put in place both in Aurora and Fort Collins, as both of those cities were developing what kinds of policies or zoning changes might they need to explore. We also discussed 2 different CPD policy changes. One would be a text amendment to the zoning code that allowed for the replacement of units. The next, which would be a much longer term effort, would be actually creating a zone district or use or some other kind of future path for how we either designate or zone mobile home parks in Denver. And I will say that the policies that were proposed were actually proposed by Community Planning and Development. They really laid out, here are a number of the things that could happen or could be changed when it comes to our zoning code. And here are the timeframes that they might take, and we've been deliberating a lot of those things since January. So what is the moratorium? This is something that began discussion this summer. It's modeled after Aurora's 10-month moratorium, which was enacted in 2018. And it prohibited redevelopment while the work group determines what to do with their parks, what to do with their zoning, in order to make sure that there wasn't disruption to that land use while they were trying to figure out the future path. The text amendment. So this wouldn't begin this year, likely early next year, and it would revise the zoning code potentially to have, this is the text amendment for the replacement. I'm ahead of myself. So the replacement, if we were to start it this year, it wouldn't go into effect until early 2023, but it would allow homeowners to have a new HUD-approved manufactured home without violating what is our current non-conforming use status of the mobile home parks. The new zone district is something that would begin next year, and that's still the path that we're discussing with CPD of what would that need to look like, what would it include. Creating a new zone district is not a simple thing, so we would have to continue the work of this work group to figure that out. And that's it. Yes, Councilwoman Black.
Thank you for your presentation and thanks for working on it. I have two questions. Why is it not allowed to replace your current mobile home with a better one, a safer one?
It's considered an expansion according to our zoning code. And mobile home parks in our code are not allowed to expand. So replacing an old unit with a new unit would be considered expansion, which is the change, the early change that we can make more quickly. It still would trigger distance requirements. So if you put in any new housing structure, it's got to be 10 feet, potentially 5 feet from its nearest neighbor, depending on the firewalls that are provided in that particular home. So that's, I think, what it triggers. What we also recognize is that one of the mobile home parks in Council District 3, for example, the homes are very close to one another. So we're also in conversation with the owners of that park. This particular modification to the zoning code was advocated at least 5 to 8 years ago by the owner of the park in my district. And is one of the reasons why I think we're at the table right now to try to figure out a new path. That's likely the reason why, but it's specifically in the zoning code that you cannot replace.
Okay, and so the distance requirement right now between them is not being adhered to in these older parks?
They're not, right, because they haven't changed anything. Nothing is triggered in terms of those building code rules.
Okay, and then is the work group currently meeting? Is that already happening, or is that something that's going to happen?
We've been meeting since January to discuss any of the policy changes that could be on the table, and we'd continue to meet.
Okay, and is it you, Councilwoman Sita Baca, and Councilman Clark are all on it?
Correct.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes. And I should have also allowed Councilwoman Sita Baca and Councilman Clark any comments before we take more questions.
You said it all.
Okay.
It's pretty simple. We're discriminating against this housing type, and we're trying to create a space in the code to allow it. Those changes are necessary in a lot of these parks for safety concerns, and right now, if you try to make them safer, you essentially displace people. And so we've got to figure out something, and this is an opportunity for us to discuss it. We have a mobile home park developer who really wants to talk to you all. And so we hope that eventually we can invite him in to talk a little bit about why he thinks that this is a model that is doable and can put people into housing quickly.
Thank you. Yep. Councilwoman Kinich.
Thanks so much for your work on this. And I wanted to kind of follow up because so I spent some time, I think I shared you my background that when you first started this, you reached out and I shared the background that I got. But my understanding of the building code is that a zoning change would not solve anything for the existing parks. So all 3 parks have, right, okay, sorry, 3 districts, sorry. All of the parks have units that are too close together, and that the building code is such that you could actually, so here's what I heard something very different when I dug into this legally, is that you could replace a unit under the zoning code as long as there was no change in the footprint of the park. But you can't because of the building code, that it is strictly a building code issue that prevents replacement of a like for like. And the reason, so here are the options. If you replaced, if you wanted to replace an existing home 1-for-1 in the parks, you would be creating, you would then be triggered under the building code. Because just like people are grandfathered under the zoning code, they're grandfathered under the building code. And when you brought in that new unit, suddenly you'd be in violation of that distance requirement. Some of those units are as close as 3 feet. So even with the fireproof materials, you can't get to the 5 feet distancing. And so the park would have to reduce the number of units, right? The alternative is, the zoning code is important if you want to develop a new park or if you want to change the footprint of the existing park. But it was my legal understanding that the building code is the main issue. So I guess I want to just make sure whether I got different information than you, but it's my sense that this change would not allow replacement of any updating of any units, which is frustrating, right? And I think that I had the same concern, and I share the same feeling about what's wrong with the situation we have today, but that without changing the building code or reducing the number of units by potentially up to half in some of the parks, that a zoning change does not change anything for the existing parks. So I just want to square up what you heard and what I heard.
Absolutely, and we've got Jill from CPD on Zoom. If we can get her promoted in, I'd love for her to respond as well. I know for the park in District 3, so this has been one of the discussion points that has come up, I think, quite a bit, because they were interested in starting to replace units and came up against the same issue, but it was also that they couldn't replace. And so, Jill, I don't know if you're on.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, I'm here.
Kenich's question.
I was being promoted. I think I heard the question, but please stop me if not. First, good afternoon, Jill Jennings-Golick, Deputy Director, Community Planning and Development. And yes, Councilwoman Kenich, you are correct. A zoning code change does not change the building code. We have been clear in our conversations to date that this will not result in a 1-for-1 unit replacement because of the separation issues that exist. And so the text amendment proposal would essentially require that International Residential Code building separation be followed for unit replacement. And so one of the first things that would have to be done is a survey for the park to understand current conditions, because we can't reduce that sort of life safety issue that exists today and make it exacerbate that with new construction. So you are correct. There are construction methods that do allow that 10-foot separation to be reduced if they do fire-rated walls, depending on the amount of openings. But our building folks have been a part of this conversation. So hopefully that helps answer the question.
Well, so I guess I would like to go back to the building code issue in a minute, but first I guess I just want to ask you all as sponsors, knowing that you actually won't be able to use the text amendment to replace units, I guess I just want to ask I'm concerned about managing expectations, both for owners of parks as well as residents. And so what's your motivation or what's your hope of doing this, knowing that you can't actually replace under the building code?
So not all the parks need a 1-for-1 replacement is one of the first things that I'll say. So one in mine and one in Councilwoman Cedabaca's district, and she can talk about the one that she sees. A number of the units have become vacant, and they are purchased by the owner of the park to keep vacant so that they can begin spacing out once allowed to replace units. And begin that process of creating kind of a conforming mobile home park according to this. So, Councilwoman Cedabaca?
I think there's another piece of this that's important. So We have had a situation where one of our parks went up for sale, and one of the barriers to another organization buying that lot was the non-conforming zoning. They couldn't get financiers to finance them for an illegally placed unit. And so this is to open up doors for our entities like Community Land Trust to capture that land when there is an opportunity, or for our individuals. We had state legislation change that is supposed to enable a trailer owner to buy the land or have an option to buy the land if it goes up for sale. And they also are unable to get financing for non-conforming land. And so this is one step in the direction of protecting that land and allowing people to get financed to protect it.
Those are both really great answers, and I think it makes a lot of sense, and appreciate your leadership. I guess, so it's like through attrition, we might be able to do some of the spacing and replacements. Some parks that may take a lot longer than others, but in either case, it's a conforming use. Can I ask some questions then about the slide says to allow homeowners to have HUD-approved manufactured homes. I just want to clarify. So my understanding of the zoning code is we allow manufactured homes, we don't allow mobile homes. And so I just want to check to see, maybe Jill wants to chime in on this one too, whether or not we will be legalizing mobile homes with the text amendment, because there are manufactured homes by HUD that are not mobile, and so they wouldn't violate the code today. But this would allow, my follow-up question is, would it allow development of a new mobile home park potentially? Not that that's necessarily a likely scenario or a major goal, but if we're making this an allowed use, presumably then someone else could do a new one, right? I guess, so two questions there.
So I'm trying to get to the right section in Article 12. I don't have it up yet, but the zoning code right now prohibits replacement of mobile homes with any type of HUD certified unit. And again, I'll get the right language, and I'm not sure if Libby Kaiser is on as well from CPD. She might have this better than I do. So the intent would be, right now the code only allows replacement with a pre-HUD certified unit, which, as I have been told, those are really hard to find, likely not necessarily in better condition, and that's been one of the issues. So we would be changing in this initial text amendment, and we're just really getting started. We hope to really kick off the process in October. So there's lots to be talked through, but the intent would be that you could replace with a HUD certified unit, and that would not trigger the current requirement in Article 12, which would discontinue your non-conforming use status. In terms of the bigger picture question, I think that is all to be discussed as we look beyond this initial Article 12 change.
Say it back to you to make sure I heard it right. So this change is really, really narrow. It allows replacement of an existing unit with a particular model of new unit. It doesn't legalize mobile homes or mobile home parks. They would still continue to be prohibited use in the future. So I guess my question is, does that solve the issue Councilwoman Sayeda Baca raised? If we're not really legalizing mobile home parks, are these parks, as long as it gets, does it really get rid of the non-conforming use then for the parks?
They would remain a non-conforming use. What we have been told by at least one group working on sort of resident ownership is the hiccup from a financial perspective has been our code not allowing unit replacement. They work and finance ownership of parks in many areas that are non-conforming uses. That at least as what we have been told to date does not seem to be the barrier from a financing perspective. It's replacement.
And this is the short-term step toward the long-term goals that we have. So this is the most immediate step in a series of steps that we plan to bring forward.
Got it. That's really helpful. I guess I will just raise a comment about the longer term steps that you mentioned, because right now, many cities, as you know, responding to homelessness, it's illegal to reside in any unit with a wheel, right? So when we, you know, as a city in our infinite wisdom in the 50s decided that mobile homes, you know, had to go and they were wrong for the city, we, you know, made that sweeping change. And so it is, that larger prohibition on mobile homes is standing in the way of us doing something like what Community First Village, many of you have been there in Austin, they have both tiny homes and mobile homes in that park. I think it probably makes it harder, if not impossible, to do a safe outdoor space for RVs or for mobile homes, right? And not that that would necessarily be the right step for RVs and mobile homes. They're very different than people sleeping in their cars in terms of the whole realm of research around it. But I do think that as we think about other ways the prohibition on mobile homes is affecting our city, I think it's important for us to think about that. So if I can just, you know, ask y'all in phase 2 of the conversation to keep that in mind, that would be great. But really appreciate the answers to the questions, and a really creative, you know, way to get at the narrow solution. So I guess the last thing I will just say is I am very frustrated by the building code issue. Right now, today, units that are 50 years old with bad electrical are 3 feet apart. Right. To pretend that those residents are safer today than they would be in a new home 3 feet apart is a legal fiction. It's a total fiction. It pretends everybody's fine today, and it closes our eyes to how they live today and says it wouldn't be safe for them to live in a totally new unit 3 feet apart tomorrow. I wish there was a solution to that. I actually spent a ton of time researching the question of where the 10-foot rule came from, how much research and science was behind it. You know, there's just a million questions about that. And I would ask Jill to continue to push our building officials to think about the actual safety risk people live in today, rather than this fictionalized world that we want to avoid in the future. I actually am not sure how fast your attrition will work, and I would love to see us get to a solution on the building code piece as well that doesn't involve displacement, right? Yeah. And so I don't know, I could not come up with one that made it through any of the gates, but maybe new people are in those jobs and can be more creative. But I think just pretending that we should leave the world as it is safer is just wrong. And so I know you guys have probably been banging your heads against the same doors, but in case a fourth voice is helpful, I just appreciate that you're working on it. So thanks.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I think that's exactly the reality that we're moved by as well. That, you know, we can't live in a 50-year-old reality of mobile home parks, whether you hated them or loved them. The reality is that people are they're homes to 300 plus families right now, and allowing for dignity, for evolution of thought is definitely what we're after. So I appreciate your comments and your questions. Yes, Councilman Sidibaca.
Thank you. Yes, and we're totally in agreement. In fact, raise your hand if you want to legalize wheels, because we can throw that in. But I do want to know if Jill could possibly discuss what the barrier is to that change right here on the front end.
In terms of the issue related to housing on wheels?
Yes.
Honestly, I would have to talk with my team and get back to you on that.
This we will be bringing back, like before things really get filed and we have a better idea. We don't have moratorium language drafted yet. We will begin the replacement text amendment in October. So this is all just to put it on everybody's radar early, what kinds of things we're thinking about, and certainly thinking about a district early next year will definitely be a lot more conversation with council.
You have 2 other people in the queue.
Go ahead, can you call them?
Yep. Up next, we have Councilman Hines.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President, or excuse me, Council President, for bringing this forward. As Councilmember Kinich talked about the the homes themselves. I actually did a bit of research about these parks, and what I learned, and maybe I learned it incorrectly, was that there were also issues around the space underneath the manufactured homes, as in the grading was non-conforming. There were ruts that had formed over years, and there were issues with sewage and connectivity with sewage lines, and so that it's been a couple of years since I did the research, but as I recall, that was the sticking point in my mind, not just the dwellings themselves, but that we want to make sure that the property underneath the dwelling is also conforming. Did you do that research? And
So thank you, Councilman Hines. That would be research that would be coming in next for that zone district conversation, because everything that comes into play when you're creating or talking about a zone district would, I think, start to bring that in, including what are the setbacks, what are kind of walking, driving requirements, and sewage and water are one of the things that's on it. So we do have folks currently in the working group who are kind of bringing in that expertise, but so not existing research, but I expect it to be coming.
got it. Okay, yeah. So I mean that was something that was concerning to me as well. I mean, just throwing it out, representing a community, the people with disabilities are disproportionately lower in the income scale, and having access to manufactured homes in a park could be transformative for some, but if the area around these parks are in not great condition, I don't know exactly what condition they're in because I haven't taken a tour of Denver's parks, but I just want to make sure that we're not legalizing something that is patently unsafe for anyone, and is inaccessible for some.
Well, and we've got Dottie at the table for this conversation with our entire conversation, and so they're bringing up not just what new units would have to comply with, but also floodplain requirements, a variety of different things like that. So the city also wouldn't be able to allow, I think, a new unit if certain things were not met. So I think all of those are at play, and our owners also know that. So it will be, I think, a constant conversation though with the owners of our parks. I know the one in mine has been trying to do this for a long time. So they just need the door open for them to start to improve their site.
Okay, yeah, if the owners are purchasing with the idea that they want to make a park with manufactured homes that works, then that's great. I just want to make sure that we don't have an owner or 5 owners, and I don't know any of the owners and I haven't done any of the research, but that we're not trying to set up a profit motive for people who would basically be exploiting the residents. Yeah. So thank you, President Pro Tem.
Thank you. Who's next?
Next up in the queue, we have Councilwoman Ortega.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Thanks for bringing this forward. This is something I was contacted about a number of years ago, and I remember also dealing with some units that were burned out over at York Street, and we had to work with the health department just to, get them removed, and apparently whoever was doing some work on them didn't have a permit to remove the asbestos and some of those issues, and then trying to replace them with new units was like not even allowable. So when you're talking about trying to meet the needs of people who are living in what everybody considers more affordable housing, we got to find different ways to make it happen. So my question is about the how far you guys have looked into where they're being manufactured, which may be off-site, maybe even out of Denver, and the issue of not having to inspect every single unit, but where you have models where all your one bedrooms look exactly the same, all your two bedrooms look exactly the same, where they can do those initial inspections, and as long as everything's being built to those same specs, that they could be like approved so that you don't have to go through the lengthy timeline it takes to get a permit for every single unit. And then obviously wherever you're going to place them, you'll need to have separate, approvals on the foundations. And being able to do it that way means you can get them produced quicker because typically the manufacturing can build them faster, and then you're getting them, to the market quicker for the people who need them. And they may all look different. I mean, the facility down in Austin, which a number of us got a chance to go see, are very different because those are on foundations. They're not on the wheels. They're actually built on a foundation. So is that something that you all have at least looked into that far? Because this is something that I've actually been working on. Councilwoman Gilmore has been part of those conversations on the housing manufacturing side, which, may all look different than what things look like today, right? In terms of the traditional trailer home. So just wanted to ask about that. And if not, I'd love to be plugged into that conversation when you guys start talking to the building department / planning department around how all those approvals happen so that we're not bogging down bringing them to market.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question and the points. We're not there yet. We're definitely just looking at what needs to change in order to modify the zoning code itself. But I imagine we've got to get to that point at some point to really make it efficient on the other side of this conversation.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate the work of our other colleagues who are working with you to bring this forward and find a real solution to this problem.
Yeah, thank you.
Next up, we have Councilman Hines back in the queue.
Apologies, I neglected, I should have read what I wrote down, but what about 3D printed homes? Is that, if we're talking about manufactured homes, is that part of the conversation?
Not yet. We're not talking yet about what the homes are made out of, just how they comply with the zoning code right now. But like I said, I imagine we'll get there at some point soon.
Okay, and then just a comment to Councilmember Ortega's point. I'm certainly open to the discussion. I know that a lot of cars come through the same assembly line, and sometimes some have defects because we're all human, and humans put together cars, as I would imagine humans put together these manufactured homes. So if we're going to not inspect some of them, I just want to be careful that we're not giving something uninhabitable to someone. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman. Anyone else in the queue? Okay. Thank you, colleagues. We are here for any additional questions beyond this, but once we have some official language and some official actions for you to review, we'll likely come back to Budget and Policy and share that. All right? Great. Thank you. And that's the only agenda item. Yeah, so we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.